like a wound that wouldn't close. "You don't own me," Naya said, her voice steady even as her hands trembled. She stood in the center of Damien's penthouse, rain hammering against the floor-to-ceiling windows behind her. The city lights blurred into watercolor streaks 40 stories below. Damien didn't move from where he leaned against his desk, arms crossed, watching her with those dark eyes that had seen through every wall she'd ever built. His white shirt was unbuttoned at the collar, sleeves rolled up, revealing forearms corded with tension. He looked dangerous in his stillness, like a predator deciding whether to pounce or wait. "I never said I did." His voice was low, controlled, but she heard the edge underneath. "But you're lying to yourself if you think you came here tonight because you wanted to leave." Naya's breath caught. He was right, and she hated him for it. 3 months ago, she would have laughed if someone told her she'd be standing here, drenched from running through the rain, arguing with a man who had systematically dismantled every defense she'd spent years constructing. 3 months ago, she was safe. Numb, maybe, but safe. Now she was anything but. "This is exactly why I can't do this anymore," she said, grabbing her purse from the couch. "You always know. You always see right through me, and I hate it. I hate that you make me feel like I'm transparent, like I'm some puzzle you've already solved. That's not what I'm doing." "Then what are you doing, Damien?" She spun to face him, and the rawness in her own voice surprised her. "Because it feels like you're inside my head, reading thoughts I haven't even had yet, knowing things about me I don't want anyone to know." He pushed off the desk and walked toward her with measured steps. Each footfall seemed to echo in the vast space of his apartment. When he stopped, he was close enough that she could smell his cologne, something dark and expensive that she'd come to associate with sleepless nights and decisions she shouldn't make. "I'm trying," he said quietly, "to be someone you can trust. By controlling everything, by protecting you. I don't need protection. I need freedom." Something flickered across his face, so quick she almost missed it. "Pain, maybe, or recognition. Even from yourself?" he asked. The question hung between them like a challenge and a confession all at once. Naya felt her resolve wavering, felt the familiar pull toward him that had gotten her into this mess in the first place. She knew if she stayed another minute, she'd give in. She always did, so she walked to the door. "Naya!" She stopped, her hand on the cold metal handle, but didn't turn around. "This isn't over," Damien said, and it wasn't a threat. It was a promise. Or maybe a warning. "It has to be," she whispered and left. The hallway was silent except for the soft hum of the elevator descending from the penthouse. Naya pressed her forehead against the cool metal wall and tried to breathe. Tried to remember what her life was like before him. The problem was she couldn't. 12 weeks earlier, Naya Blake had been a completely different person. Or at least that's what she told herself. She worked as a trauma therapist at St. Catherine's Hospital, helping other people put their broken pieces back together while carefully ignoring her own. Her days were structured, predictable, safe. Morning coffee at the same cafe, the same route to work, the same lunch spot, the same evening routine of wine and reality TV that required no emotional investment. Her best friend, Marissa, called it living in a cage of your own making. "You're 28, not 80. Marissa had said over drinks one Friday night, eyeing Naya's sensible blouse and pulled-back hair with obvious disapproval. "When was the last time you did something unpredictable?" "I ordered the spicy tuna instead of the California roll last week." "Naya, I'm serious. You've been in this self-imposed witness protection program for 3 years. Marcus doesn't get to ruin your life forever." At the mention of her ex-fiancé's name, Naya's jaw tightened. Marcus, who had promised her forever and delivered betrayal. Marcus, who had slept with her sister and somehow made Naya feel like she was the problem for being too intense, too emotional, too much. "I'm not in witness protection. I'm being careful." "You're being dead," Marissa said bluntly. "There's a difference between being careful and refusing to live at all." Naya had let the comment slide, changed the subject, paid for her half of the bill and gone home to her quiet apartment where everything was exactly where she'd left it. Safe, controlled, hers. But Marissa's words had stuck. The next night, Naya did something she never did. She went to the Velvet Room, an exclusive members-only club that Marissa had been begging her to visit for months. Marissa had connections through her job in fashion PR, and she'd been dying to take Naya somewhere where the lighting is actually flattering and the men are devastatingly problematic. Just try it, Marissa had pleaded. One night. If you hate it, we'll leave. Naya wore a black dress she'd bought on impulse 2 years ago and never had the courage to wear. It hugged curves she usually hid under layers of professional armor. Her dark hair was down, loose waves falling past her shoulders. When she looked in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. Good, she thought. Maybe that's the point. The Velvet Room was everything Marissa had promised. Dim lighting, expensive cocktails, beautiful people who moved like they'd never questioned their place in the world. The music was deep and thrumming, the kind that you felt in your chest rather than heard. Naya felt immediately out of place. Relax, Marissa shouted over the music, pressing a martini into her hand. You look amazing. Just enjoy it. But Naya couldn't relax. She felt exposed, vulnerable, like she'd stepped out of her carefully constructed life and into someone else's. She was about to suggest they leave when Marissa grabbed her arm. Oh my God. Don't look now. But the hottest man I've ever seen is staring at you. Of course, Naya looked. Across the room, in a private section elevated slightly above the main floor, a man sat alone in a leather booth. Even from a distance, even in the low light, Naya could feel the weight of his gaze. He was watching her with an intensity that made her skin flush. He was beautiful in a way that seemed almost unfair. Sharp features, dark hair styled with careless precision, a build that suggested he could be both gentle and devastating depending on his mood. He wore all black, expensive, tailored. A glass of amber liquid sat untouched on the table in front of him. That's Damien Cross, Marissa whispered, her voice filled with awe. He owns half the city. Real estate, tech, hospitality. He's basically untouchable. Then why is he alone? Maybe he's waiting for someone. Marissa grinned. Or maybe he just found her. Before Naya could protest, Marissa was actually waving at this man who looked like he could buy and sell people as easily as stocks. To Naya's horror, he stood and walked toward them. I'm going to kill you, Naya hissed, but Marissa was already preening. Damien Cross moved through the crowd like it parted specifically for him. Maybe it did. When he reached them, he ignored Marissa entirely and focused on Naya with an attention that felt like being placed under a microscope. You look like you'd rather be anywhere else, he said, and his voice was exactly what she'd expected. Deep, smooth, dangerous. I'm not great with crowds, Naya admitted, then immediately wondered why she'd told him the truth. Neither am I. He extended his hand. Damien. Naya. She took his hand, and the contact sent electricity up her arm. His grip was firm, warm, and he held on just a second longer than necessary. Would you like to go somewhere quieter? He asked. Every instinct Naya had screamed that this was a bad idea. This man was clearly out of her league, clearly used to getting what he wanted, clearly the exact kind of distraction she'd spent 3 years avoiding. But maybe that was exactly why she heard herself say, yes. Marissa looked like she might faint from excitement as Damien led Naya toward a private elevator at the back of the club. The doors closed, sealing them in silence, and Naya was suddenly very aware of how close he was standing. Where are we going? She asked. My office. It's on the top floor. Quieter. The elevator rose smoothly, and Naya caught their reflection in the mirrored walls. They looked like they belonged in different universes. Him, all controlled power and expensive elegance. Her, trying desperately to look like she knew what she was doing. You're nervous, Damien observed. Is it that obvious? Only to someone paying attention. He tilted his head, studying her. Why did you come with me? I don't know, she said honestly. Maybe because I'm tired of being careful. Something shifted in his expression. A crack in the controlled facade. Careful is overrated. The elevator opened onto a floor that was less office and more private sanctuary. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed the city spread out below them like a galaxy of lights. The space was minimalist, elegant, expensive. A desk, a bar, a few carefully chosen pieces of art that probably cost more than Naya made in a year. And it was completely silent. "Drink," Damien asked, moving to the bar. "Water is fine." He poured her water in crystal glass and himself whiskey, then gestured to the windows. "Come here." Naya joined him, and together they looked out at the city. From this height, everything seemed small, manageable. The chaos below was reduced to twinkling lights and tiny cars. "Do you come here often?" she asked, then cringed at the cliché. But Damien smiled, and it transformed his face completely. "When I need to think, or when I need to remember why I do what I do, which is build things, control things." He took a sip of his whiskey. "Fix things that are broken." "That sounds exhausting." "It is." He turned to face her fully, and the intensity was back. "What do you do, Naya?" "I'm a therapist. I help people deal with trauma." "Interesting." He set his glass down. "So you fix broken things too." "I help people fix themselves." "There's a difference." "Is there?" He stepped closer, and Naya's heart started racing. "Because from where I'm standing, it sounds like we do the same thing. We just have different methods." "What's your method?" "Control," he said simply. "If you can control the variables, you can control the outcome." "That's not how people work." "No," he agreed, his eyes never leaving hers. "But it's how I work." Naya should have left right then. Should have recognized the red flags waving so obviously in front of her. But she was mesmerized by him, by the way he looked at her like she was the only thing in the room that mattered. "Why did you really bring me up here?" she asked. Damien was silent for a long moment. Then, "Because from the moment I saw you, I knew you were dangerous." "Dangerous?" She almost laughed. "I'm probably the least dangerous person you'll ever meet." "That's not what I meant." He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, the gesture impossibly gentle coming from someone who radiated such power. "You're dangerous to me, because you make me want things I've convinced myself I don't need." "Like what?" "Connection. Honesty. Someone who sees through the performance." Naya's breath caught. "You don't even know me." "I know enough." His thumb traced her jawline, and she shivered. "I know you came to that club tonight even though you didn't want to. I know you're wearing armor disguised as a dress. I know you've been hurt, and you're terrified it might happen again. I know you think if you stay small and quiet and controlled, you'll be safe." "Stop," she whispered. But she didn't move away. "Why?" "Because I'm right. Because you don't get to read me like that. You don't get to look at me and know things about me I haven't told you." "Then tell me I'm wrong," he challenged. But she couldn't, because every word was true. "This is insane," Naya said, shaking her head. "I don't even know you. So get to know me." Damien's hand dropped, but he didn't step back. "Have dinner with me. Tomorrow night." "I can't." "Why not?" "Because..." She searched for a reason that didn't sound like she was running away from herself. "Because you scare me." "Good," he said. "You should be scared. I am too." "Of what?" "Of what I might do to keep you." The honesty in his voice was startling. Naya looked up at him and saw something in his eyes that matched the chaos in her chest. Want, need, a hunger that went beyond physical. She should have said no. Should have walked away right then and saved herself from whatever this was. Instead, she said, "One dinner. That's all." Damien smiled, slow and dangerous. "We'll see. Loving this so far?" Hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what you think Naya should do. Is Damien a red flag or the kind of risk worth taking? Let me know below. Dinner was supposed to be simple, public, safe. It was none of those things. Damien picked her up in a car that probably cost more than her student loans, took her to a restaurant that didn't have a sign because if you needed a sign you didn't belong there, and proceeded to dismantle every wall she tried to keep between them. "Tell me about Marcus," he said over the first course, and Naya nearly choked on her wine. "How do you know about Marcus?" "I pay attention. You mentioned being hurt. I'm guessing there's a name attached to that hurt." Naya set down her glass. "We don't have to do the trauma exchange on the first date." This isn't a date. Then what is it? An interview, Damien said, leaning back in his chair with that infuriating confidence. I'm deciding if you're worth the risk. Excuse me? You heard me. I don't do casual, Naya. If I start something, I finish it. So before we go any further, I need to know if you're strong enough to handle what being with me means. Naya felt anger flare hot in her chest. You're incredibly arrogant. I'm honest. There's a difference. He leaned forward, elbows on the table, and fixed her with that penetrating stare. So tell me about Marcus. Tell me why you think you're not strong enough for this. I never said that. You didn't have to. Naya wanted to leave, wanted to throw her napkin down and walk out and block his number and pretend this night never happened. But something kept her in her seat. Maybe it was the challenge in his eyes. Maybe it was the way he looked at her like she was a problem worth solving. Or maybe she was just tired of running. Fine, she said. Marcus was my fiancé. We were together for 5 years. I thought we were building a life. Turns out, he was building a life with my sister while I was at work saving other people's relationships. She paused, the old wound throbbing. I came home early one day and found them in our bed. He told me I was too intense, too demanding, too emotional. That I made everything about feelings when he just wanted someone easy. Damien's expression didn't change, but his eyes darkened. What did you do? I left. Moved out that night. Haven't spoken to either of them since. And now you've convinced yourself that wanting intimacy makes you too much. Didn't you hear the story? I am too much. No, Damien said, his voice hard. He was too weak. The words hit her like a physical thing. Naya had spent 3 years internalizing Marcus's criticisms, believing that her need for connection was a flaw rather than a strength. And here was this stranger, this intimidating, impossible man, telling her the opposite. You don't know that, she said quietly. I know that any man who makes you feel like you need to be less is a coward. Damien reached across the table and took her hand, his thumb brushing over her knuckles. Intensity isn't a weakness, Naya. It's a gift, but it requires someone strong enough to match it. And you think you're that someone. I know I am. The certainty in his voice should have annoyed her. Instead, it sent a thrill down her spine. What about you? She asked, turning the tables. What's your damage? Because someone who talks about control the way you do definitely has a story. Damien smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Fair question. My damage is that I was taught very young that trust is a liability. My father built an empire by never letting anyone close enough to hurt him. When he died, he left me everything, including the lesson that emotional attachment is weakness. That's incredibly sad. That's reality. He released her hand and picked up his wine. I've spent 15 years building walls, Naya. I'm very good at it. But then I saw you in that club, looking like you'd rather disappear than be seen, and something in me recognized something in you. What? The same fear, that if we let someone in, they'll destroy us. Naya's throat tightened. So what are we doing here? I don't know, Damien admitted, and the vulnerability in his voice was shocking. But I'd like to find out. The rest of dinner passed in a blur of conversation that felt less like getting to know each other and more like recognizing each other. They talked about everything. Books, music, childhood wounds, professional ambitions, the weight of other people's expectations. By the time dessert arrived, Naya felt drunk on his attention. Come home with me, Damien said as they left the restaurant. That's moving fast. I'm not talking about sex. He helped her into the car, then slid in beside her. I'm talking about trust. Come to my place. Let me show you who I am when I'm not performing. Every rational part of Naya's brain screamed no. But the part of her that had been numb for 3 years, the part that Damien seemed determined to wake up, whispered yes. Okay, she said. Damien's penthouse was exactly what she expected. Expensive, minimalist, controlled. But there were small details that surprised her. Books everywhere, most of them worn and well-read. A piano in the corner, sheet music stacked haphazardly on the bench. A photograph of a young boy and an older man, both smiling. Your father? She asked, picking up the frame. And me a long time ago. Damien took the photo from her and set it down carefully. Before I learned that smiling makes you vulnerable. You smile. Not like that. Not anymore. Naya turned to face him. Why did you really bring me here, Damien? Because I want you to see this. He gestured to the space around them. This is what I've built. This is the fortress I hide in. And I want you to understand that if you let me in, I'm going to want to do the same to you. What does that mean? It means I'm going to want to know everything. Every scar, every fear, every secret you keep to protect yourself. I'm going to want to dismantle your walls the same way you're dismantling mine just by standing here. Naya's pulse raced. That terrifies me. I know. He stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from him. But tell me you don't want it anyway. She couldn't, because she did want it. Wanted him. Wanted whatever this dangerous, impossible thing was growing between them. What if I'm not strong enough? She whispered. Then I'll catch you, Damien said and kissed her. The kiss was nothing like she expected. It wasn't aggressive or demanding. It was gentle, questioning, like he was asking permission with every movement. His hands came up to frame her face, thumbs brushing her cheekbones, and Naya felt something in her chest crack open. When they pulled apart, she was shaking. Stay, Damien said against her lips. Just sleep. I just want to hold you. Naya knew this was a terrible idea. Knew that staying meant crossing a line she might not be able to uncross. But she was so tired of being careful. Okay, she breathed. That night, Naya fell asleep in Damien's arms, fully clothed, feeling safer than she had in years. And when she woke up the next morning to find him watching her with an expression that looked almost like wonder, she realized she was in serious trouble. Because Damien Cross wasn't just dangerous. He was addictive. The next 6 weeks were a study in contradiction. Damien was intense and tender, demanding and generous, controlling and vulnerable. He wanted to know everything about her. What she ate for breakfast, what made her laugh, what kept her up at night. He texted her constantly, called her at random hours just to hear her voice, showed up at her apartment with her favorite coffee order before she even knew she wanted it. This is bordering on stalking, Naya joked one morning when she found him waiting outside her building at 6 a.m. with lattes and croissants. I prefer dedicated, Damien said, handing her a cup. I had a meeting cancel. Thought you might want company on your commute. The gesture should have felt suffocating. Instead, it felt like being seen. But there were moments that unsettled her. The way he'd text immediately if she didn't respond within an hour. The way he'd ask detailed questions about her patients, her colleagues, her daily routine. The way he seemed to need to know where she was at all times. He's just attentive, Marissa said when Naya expressed concern. Girl, do you know how many women would kill for a man who actually pays attention? It feels like more than attention. It feels like surveillance. Or maybe you're just not used to someone caring this much. That was possible. Naya had spent so long in self-imposed isolation that she'd forgotten what connection felt like. Maybe she was overreacting. Maybe this was what a real relationship looked like when both people were all in. But then there was the incident at the gallery. Damien had invited her to an art opening. One of those exclusive events where champagne flowed and everyone spoke in hushed, reverent tones about pieces that looked like expensive accidents. Naya wore a green dress that Damien had sent to her apartment with a note. This will look perfect on you. Wear it for me. She almost didn't. The presumption bothered her. But when she put it on and saw how it hugged her curves, how the color made her eyes bright, she understood why he'd chosen it. The man had impeccable taste. The gallery was crowded with the kind of people who made Naya feel perpetually underdressed and overthinking. But Damien kept his hand on the small of her back, a warm, possessive presence that anchored her. You look incredible, he murmured in her ear. Every man here is staring at you. I doubt that. I don't. I've counted 3 in the last 5 minutes who've looked at you like they want to replace me. Naya laughed. You're being paranoid. I'm being observant. His hand tightened slightly. And I don't share. The edge in his voice made her stomach flutter. There was something primal in his possessiveness. Something that should have bothered her but instead sent heat pooling low in her belly. They were admiring a particularly abstract piece when a voice interrupted. Damien Cross. I heard rumors you'd finally surfaced from your cave. Naya turned to see a woman who looked like she'd stepped out of a fashion magazine. Tall, blonde, elegant, with the kind of confidence that came from knowing she was beautiful and using it as currency. Victoria, Damien said, his voice noticeably cooler. I didn't know you were in town. Just flew in this morning. London was unbearable. Victoria's eyes slid to Naya, assessing and dismissing in one glance. And who's this? Naya Blake, Naya said, extending her hand. Nice to meet you. Victoria's handshake was limp, performative. How sweet. Damien, we need to talk about the Milan property. I know you've been avoiding my calls. But not tonight, Damien interrupted. I'm here with Naya. I can see that. Victoria's smile was sharp. Well, don't let me interrupt your evening. But we do need to talk, darling. Soon. She swept away in a cloud of perfume and entitlement, and Naya felt tension radiating from Damien like heat. Ex-girlfriend? She asked lightly. Business partner. And yes, briefly, a mistake. He turned to face her fully. That was years ago. She means nothing. You don't have to explain. I do. His intensity was back, that laser focus that made her feel like the only person in the world. Because I need you to understand that what we have is different. You're different. Damien. Come on. He took her hand. Let's go. They left the gallery and ended up walking along the waterfront, the city lights reflecting off the dark water. Damien was silent, brooding, and Naya could feel the war happening inside him. Talk to me, she said finally. Victoria represents everything I've spent my life building, Damien said, staring out at the water. Power, success, control. She understands the game. She doesn't ask for things I can't give. And I do. You ask for the one thing I've never been able to give anyone. He turned to look at her. You ask me to be real. Naya's heart clenched. Is that so terrible? It's terrifying, he admitted, because I don't know how to be real without being vulnerable. And vulnerability is how people destroy you. Or how they love you. Same thing sometimes. Naya stepped closer, reaching up to touch his face. Not always. Sometimes vulnerability is how you let someone see you, really see you, and they choose to stay anyway. Damien closed his eyes, leaning into her touch. What if I can't do this? What if I'm too broken? Then we'll be broken together, she said, and meant it. He kissed her then, desperate and deep, like he was trying to crawl inside her soul. They stood there on the waterfront, wrapped in each other, and Naya felt something shift between them. A deepening. A dangerous, beautiful deepening. When they finally pulled apart, Damien rested his forehead against hers. I'm falling for you, he said. And it fucking terrifies me. Good, Naya whispered. Because I'm falling for you too. That night they made love for the first time, and it was nothing like Naya expected. Damien was reverent, almost worshipful, taking his time to learn every inch of her body like he was memorizing a sacred text. He murmured against her skin, telling her she was beautiful, perfect, his, and Naya felt herself surrendering in ways that went beyond physical. Afterward, lying in his arms in the darkness of his bedroom, she felt complete in a way she'd never experienced. Don't leave, Damien said, pulling her closer. Stay with me, always. And in that moment, drunk on endorphins and emotion, Naya believed they could make this work. She had no idea how wrong she was. The cracks started small. It began with passwords. Damien wanted her apartment key, her phone passcode, her email login. So I can take care of you, he said. So I know you're safe. Naya gave him the apartment key but hesitated on the rest. I need some privacy, Damien. Privacy from me? His tone was light, but she heard the hurt underneath. I thought we weren't keeping secrets. It's not about secrets. It's about boundaries. Boundaries are what people use when they don't trust each other. The conversation ended in an argument that resolved with Damien apologizing, pulling her close, promising he'd respect her space. But Naya noticed that he'd check her phone when she wasn't looking, ask detailed questions about her day, get quiet and withdrawn if she took too long to respond to his texts. "He's getting possessive," she told Marissa over lunch. "And I don't know if it's sweet or scary." "Both, probably," Marissa said, stabbing her salad. "The question is whether it's coming from love or control. How do I tell the difference? Does it make you feel cherished or suffocated?" Naya thought about it. "Both," she admitted. "Then you need to set harder boundaries before this gets worse." But setting boundaries with Damien was like trying to hold back the tide. Every line she drew, he found a way around. Not aggressively, but persistently. He'd show up at her work with lunch, saying he was just in the neighborhood. He'd call her patients by name, having somehow learned their details from conversations she didn't remember having. He knew her schedule better than she did. "You're keeping tabs on me?" she said one evening after he mentioned an appointment she'd forgotten to tell him about. "I'm paying attention," he corrected. "There's a difference. It feels invasive. It feels like love," Damien countered. "At least to me. Maybe your problem is that you've never had someone love you properly." The comment stung because there was truth in it, but it also made her angry. "Don't psychoanalyze me," she said, "and don't use my past to justify behavior that makes me uncomfortable." Damien's expression hardened. "So I make you uncomfortable now? That's not what I said. But it's what you meant." He stood, pacing his living room like a caged animal. "This is what I was afraid of. That you'd start seeing me as the villain in your story instead of the person trying to love you. I don't see you as a villain. I see you as someone who's struggling with control issues. And I see you as someone who's using therapy language to avoid actual intimacy." The words hit like a slap. Naya felt tears prick her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "That's not fair. Neither is punishing me for caring about you." They stood on opposite sides of the room, the space between them feeling vast and uncrossable. Naya recognized this pattern. The push and pull, the intensity that felt like love but tasted like something darker. "I need some space," she said quietly. "Space from me or from us? I don't know. Both, maybe." Damien's face went carefully blank, and Naya knew she'd wounded him. But she also knew that if she didn't step back, she'd lose herself completely in him. "Fine," he said. "Take your space. But don't be surprised when I'm not here when you come back." It was a threat disguised as hurt, and they both knew it. Naya grabbed her bag and left, and this time, she didn't look back. The week that followed was torture. Damien didn't call, didn't text, didn't show up at her apartment. It was exactly what Naya had asked for, and it made her miserable. She threw herself into work, seeing patients back to back, helping other people navigate their relationships while hers imploded. "You look like hell," Marissa observed when they met for coffee. "I feel like hell." "Have you talked to him?" "No. He's giving me exactly what I asked for. Space." "And how's that working out?" "I hate it," Naya admitted. "I miss him. Constantly. It's like there's this hole in my chest that only he can fill, and I'm trying to convince myself that's not healthy." "Maybe it's not," Marissa said gently. "Or maybe you're overthinking it. Look, I know Damien is intense, but from what you've told me, he's never hurt you. He's never been cruel or manipulative. He just loves you in a way that's bigger than you're used to. But what if that love becomes suffocating? What if I lose myself? Then you set boundaries and enforce them. But Naya, you can't spend your whole life running from connection because you're afraid it might hurt. That's not living. That's just existing." The words echoed what Marissa had said months ago, before Naya met Damien. Before her carefully constructed walls came tumbling down. "What if I'm not strong enough for him?" Naya whispered. "What if you're stronger than you think?" That night, Naya stared at her phone for hours, drafting and deleting messages to Damien. Finally, at midnight, she sent a simple text, "Can we talk?" His response came immediately, "My place. Now." She shouldn't have gone. It was late. She was emotional. and showing up at his penthouse would send a message about power dynamics that she'd been trying to avoid. But she went anyway. Damien answered the door in jeans and a t-shirt, looking tired and beautiful and wrecked. "You came," he said, like he hadn't quite believed she would. "You said now." "I've been saying now for 7 days." He stepped aside to let her in. "You just weren't ready to hear it." Naya walked into the familiar space, noticing the disarray. Empty glasses, rumpled clothes, papers scattered across every surface. Damien's fortress was showing cracks. "You look terrible," she said. "That saw too much. Turns out I don't function well when you're not here." "Damien, let me finish." He pushed off the door and walked toward her slowly. "I've spent the last week trying to convince myself that I'm better off alone. That you were right to want space, that I was being too much, that I need to learn to love with an open hand instead of a closed fist. And I can't." He stopped in front of her, close but not touching. "I can't love you halfway, Naya. I can't pretend I don't want to know everything about you, be everywhere you are, make sure you're safe and happy in mine. Maybe that makes me possessive. Maybe that makes me broken. But it's the truth." Naya's heart was racing. "So what are you saying?" "I'm saying you have to decide. Either you can handle the way I love you or you can't. But I'm done apologizing for it." The ultimatum hung between them, sharp and unforgiving. Naya felt her therapist brain kicking in, analyzing the situation, noting the red flags, the potential for unhealthy attachment. But her heart was screaming something different. "What if I need you to meet me halfway?" she asked. "What if I need some autonomy while still being with you? Then tell me what that looks like," Damien said. "Give me rules. Give me boundaries. I'll follow them. Will you? Or will you find ways around them like you always do?" His jaw tightened. "That's not fair. Neither is asking me to choose between being with you and being myself." They stared at each other, the tension thick enough to choke on. Naya could feel the fork in the road, the moment where she either walked away for good or committed to figuring this out. "I want to try," she said finally. "But we need to establish real boundaries. No tracking my phone. No showing up uninvited. No interrogating me about my day. Trust me to come to you instead of hunting me down." Damien was quiet for a long moment. Then, "I can't promise I'll be perfect at it. I'm not asking for perfect. I'm asking for effort." "Then you have it." He reached for her hand, and she let him take it. "But I need something from you too." "What?" "Stop running every time you get scared. Stop using your past to predict our future. Stay and fight with me instead of disappearing." It was a fair ask, and Naya knew it. She did have a tendency to flee when things got intense, to protect herself by withdrawing before she could be hurt. "Okay," she said. "I'll try. Then we'll try together." Damien pulled her into his arms, and Naya melted into him, feeling the tight knot in her chest finally loosen. They stood there in the middle of his penthouse, holding each other like lifelines, and she felt hope kindle in her chest. Maybe they could make this work. Maybe love didn't have to be perfect to be real. Maybe she was strong enough after all. That night, they didn't make love. They just held each other, talking until dawn about fears and futures and the hard work of loving someone without losing yourself. And when Naya woke up in Damien's arms the next morning, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. For 3 blissful weeks, things were good. Not perfect, but good. Damien made a visible effort to give her space, and Naya made an effort to stay present even when her instinct was to withdraw. They established rituals. Sunday morning breakfast, Wednesday evening walks, Friday date nights that were just theirs. Naya learned to recognize when Damien was struggling with his need for control and how to gently redirect him. Damien learned to recognize when Naya was feeling suffocated and to step back before she ran. Felt like progress. "You look happy," one of her patients observed during a session. "Whatever you're doing, it's working." Naya smiled. "I'm trying something new. Trusting someone." "How's that going?" "Terrifying," she admitted. "But good." But happiness, Naya was learning, was fragile. The unraveling began with a phone call. Naya was at work when her phone rang with an unknown number. Normally she wouldn't answer, but something made her pick up. Is this Naya Blake? A woman's voice, professional, clipped. Yes. Who is this? My name is Sarah Chun. I'm a reporter with the Herald. I'm doing a piece on Damien Cross and his business practices, and your name came up in my research. I was wondering if you'd be willing to comment. Naya's blood ran cold. Comment on what? On your relationship with Mr. Cross. Specifically, whether you're aware of the allegations against him regarding his previous relationships. What allegations? There was a pause. You don't know? Know what? Another pause, longer this time. Maybe you should ask him directly. But Ms. Blake, if you're willing to talk on record about your experiences with Mr. Cross, I'd be very interested in hearing them. Here's my number. Naya hung up, her hands shaking. She immediately called Damien. We need to talk. Now. What's wrong? His voice shifted instantly from calm to alert. A reporter just called me asking about allegations against you. What is she talking about? Silence. Long, damning silence. Damien. What allegations? It's nothing, he said finally. Ancient history. Someone trying to smear me. That's not an answer. Naya, I can't talk about this over the phone. Meet me at my place after work. I'll explain everything. Tell me now. I can't. Please, just trust me until tonight. But the damage was done. Naya spent the rest of her day obsessing, researching, finding articles about Damien that painted a picture she didn't recognize. Stories about his ruthlessness in business, his tendency to destroy competitors, whispers about controlling behavior in past relationships. And one article that made her stomach drop. An interview with an ex-girlfriend who described Damien as charming until you're trapped, then suffocating. By the time Naya arrived at his penthouse that evening, she was vibrating with anxiety and anger. Explain, she demanded the moment he opened the door. Damien looked resigned, like he'd been expecting this conversation for months and dreading it. Come in. This is going to take a while. They sat in his living room, the city sprawling below them in the gathering dusk, and Damien told her everything. About his first serious relationship in his 20s, with a woman named Elena who he'd loved desperately and tried to control completely. About how she'd left him after 2 years, telling him he was emotionally suffocating, and that she'd lost herself in trying to make him happy. About his second relationship with Victoria, which had been more business arrangement than romance. She wanted access to my money and connections. I wanted someone who didn't ask me to feel things. It worked until it didn't. About the third, with a woman named Claire, who he genuinely tried to be better for. I thought I'd learned my lesson. I gave her space, tried not to be controlling. But I couldn't stop the instinct. I needed to know where she was, who she was with. She lasted 6 months before she told me I had serious problems and needed therapy. Did you go? Naya asked quietly. No. I convinced myself she was overreacting. He ran his hand through his hair. And then I met you, and all those patterns came roaring back. But this time it felt different. You felt different. How? Because you're strong enough to push back. Because you call me on my shit instead of just leaving. Because you make me want to be better even when it's hard. Naya felt tears burning her eyes. Do you hear yourself? You're describing a pattern, Damien. A pattern of hurting people who love you. I know. And you thought you wouldn't do it to me? I thought I could control it. He laughed bitterly. Control. It always comes back to that. Doesn't it? Why didn't you tell me any of this before? Because I was afraid you'd leave. And I can't. His voice cracked. I can't lose you, Naya. You're the only real thing in my life. That's too much pressure, she said, standing. I can't be your only real thing. That's not love, Damien. That's dependency. Then what do you want from me? He stood too, desperation creeping into his voice. You want me to be vulnerable, I'm vulnerable. You want me to give you space, I give you space. You want honesty, I'm being honest. What more can I do? Get help, Naya said. Real help. Therapy. Work through this need to control everything and everyone. Because I can't fix you, and I shouldn't have to. I'll do it, he said immediately. I'll call someone tomorrow. I'll do whatever it takes. You're not hearing me. Naya's voice was gentle but firm. You need to do this for yourself, not for me. If you're only changing because you're afraid of losing me, it won't last. The resentment will build, and we'll end up destroying each other. Damien's face crumpled, and seeing him break was almost more than Naya could bear. But she held firm. I need time, she said. Real time. Not a week. Months, maybe. Time for you to work on yourself and for me to figure out if I'm strong enough for this. You're leaving me. I'm taking care of myself. It's the same thing. No, Naya said, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. It's not. But if you can't see the difference, then maybe we're both right. Maybe we do need space. She walked to the door, and this time, Damien didn't try to stop her. Naya, he called when her hand was on the knob. She turned. I love you, he said, and the rawness in his voice nearly broke her. I know I'm fucked up, and I know I've hurt people, but I love you more than I've ever loved anyone, and I will do the work. Not because I'm afraid of losing you, but because you make me want to be someone worthy of you. Naya's heart was shattering, but she managed to say, then prove it. Do the work. Become that person. And maybe if we're both ready, we can try again. And if we're not, if I do everything right and you still leave, then we'll both be stronger for having tried. She left then, before she could change her mind, and cried the entire way home. The next 3 months were the hardest of Naya's life. She threw herself into work, started gonna therapy herself to process her relationship patterns, spent time with friends she'd neglected. She learned to sit with discomfort instead of running from it, to recognize the difference between healthy connection and codependency. And she missed Damien every single day. True to his word, he didn't contact her. Marissa reported that he'd started seeing a therapist who specialized in attachment issues and control behaviors. That he'd joined a men's support group. That he looked, according to mutual friends, different, quieter maybe, but more present. Do you want to see him? Marissa asked over their weekly brunch. Every day, Naya admitted. But I need to be sure I'm doing it for the right reasons. Not because I'm lonely, not because I miss the intensity, but because we've both grown enough to try again healthily. How will you know? I don't know. I guess I'll feel it. The feeling came on a random Tuesday evening 4 months after she'd walked out of Damien's penthouse. Naya was at home, reading a book about healthy relationships and attachment theory, when her doorbell rang. She opened it to find Damien standing there, holding a single white rose. He looked different, softer maybe, the sharp edges worn down to something gentler. Hi, he said. Hi. I know you said you needed time and I've tried to respect that. But I was hoping you might be willing to talk. Just talk. Nothing more. Naya knew she should say no. Should tell him it was too soon, that she wasn't ready, that she needed more time to be sure. Instead, she heard herself say, "Come in." They sat on opposite ends of her couch, a careful distance between them, and Damien told her about the last 4 months. About therapy sessions that had cracked him open and forced him to examine wounds he'd been running from for decades. About learning to sit with discomfort instead of trying to control it away. About joining a group of men who were working through similar issues. My therapist says I have anxious attachment, he said with a wry smile. Apparently, I equate love with possession because I never learned that connection can exist without control. Are you learning now? I'm trying. It's hard. Most days, my first instinct is still to reach for control when I feel vulnerable. But I'm learning to recognize it and choose differently. That's huge, Damien. It doesn't feel huge. It feels like moving a mountain 1 grain of sand at a time. He paused. But I'm doing it. Not because I think it'll make you come back, but because I realized you were right. I need to do this for me. Naya felt something in her chest loosen. I've been working on myself too, trying to understand why I'm drawn to intensity, why I equate passion with love. And I'm learning that I can have both, passion and stability, intensity and safety. I just need to find it with someone who's doing their own work too. They looked at each other across the couch, and Naya saw hope flicker in Damien's eyes. Is there a chance, he asked carefully, that someone could be me? I don't know, she said honestly. But I think I'd like to find out. Slowly, carefully, with boundaries and communication and the understanding that we're both still learning. I can do slow, Damien said. I can do careful. I can do boundaries. Can you do trust? Real trust, where you don't need to know my every move to feel secure. He was quiet for a moment. Then, I'm working on it. My therapist says trust is a practice, not a destination. So I'm practicing. Naya smiled. That's all I can ask. They talked until midnight, carefully rebuilding the bridge between them with honesty and vulnerability. When Damien finally stood to leave, he paused at the door. Can I? He hesitated. Can I hug you? Yes. He pulled her into his arms, and Naya felt the familiar safety of his embrace. But this time it didn't feel suffocating. Felt like coming home. Thank you, Damien murmured against her hair, for giving me a chance to prove I can be better. Thank you for doing the work. He pulled back, smiled down at her with an expression so tender it made her chest ache. I'll call you tomorrow? I'd like that. After he left, Naya stood in her doorway for a long time, feeling something she thought she'd lost. Hope, still here? You're amazing. If you're loving this story, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. Share this video with someone who loves dark romance. Drop a comment and tell me, Team Damien or Team Move On? Let's debate in the comments. Now back to the story. The next 6 months were a masterclass in conscious relationship building. Damien and Naya started dating again, but differently this time. They had standing appointments, therapy sessions for each of them individually, and monthly check-ins where they talked about boundaries, needs, and concerns. They went slowly, building trust one conversation at a time. There were hard moments, times when Damien's instinct to control flared up and Naya had to gently but firmly redirect him. Times when Naya's instinct to run kicked in and Damien had to practice letting her have space without panicking. But there were beautiful moments too. The first time Damien caught himself about to ask intrusive questions and stopped himself instead. The first time Naya felt triggered and stayed to work through it rather than fleeing. The slow, steady building of something real. You look happy, Marissa observed 6 months into their reconciliation. Different happy than before. I feel different, Naya said. Before, it was all intensity and passion and drowning in each other. Now it's steadier. Still deep, but with room to breathe. And Damien? He's doing the work. Really doing it. I'm proud of him. Are you in love with him again? Naya smiled. I don't think I ever stopped. I just had to learn to love him without losing myself. That night, Damien took her to the waterfront where they'd first confessed their feelings. The city lights reflected off the dark water, and Naya felt a sense of full circle completion. I've been thinking, Damien said, taking her hand, about what you said that night, about how I needed to learn to love with an open hand instead of a closed fist. And I'm trying. Every day, I'm trying to choose trust over control, to choose us over my fear of losing you. It's the hardest thing I've ever done. I know. Naya squeezed his hand. But you're doing it. We're doing it. There's something I need to ask you. He turned to face her fully, and there was vulnerability in his eyes that would have terrified him a year ago. I need to know if you think we can make this work. Long term, because I'm all in, Naya. But I need to know if you are too. Naya thought about the question. Thought about the journey they'd been on. The work they'd both done. The ways they'd grown individually and together. Thought about the nights she'd spent questioning whether loving someone this complicated was worth it. Yes, she said finally. I think we can make this work. Not because it'll be easy, but because we're both willing to do the hard things. And that matters more than intensity or passion or any of the things I used to think love required. So you're all in? I'm all in. Damien smiled, and it was genuine and open and free of the shadows that used to haunt his expression. He pulled her into his arms and kissed her, deep and sure and full of promise. And Naya felt something settle in her chest. Not the chaotic, drowning intensity of their early days, Not the desperate need to possess and be possessed. Just love. Real, messy, complicated, beautiful love. 2 years later, Naya stood in front of her bathroom mirror, staring at the positive pregnancy test in her hand. She and Damien had moved in together 6 months ago, after countless conversations about commitment and partnership, and building a life that honored both their needs. He'd sold the penthouse and they'd bought a house together, something with room to breathe and grow. Their relationship wasn't perfect. They still had moments of friction, times when old patterns tried to resurface. But they'd built a foundation strong enough to weather the storms. And now Naya walked into the living room where Damien was reading, lost in concentration. She sat down next to him and placed the test on the book. He looked at it for a long moment, then at her, then back at the test. "We're pregnant?" he asked, voice carefully neutral. "Yes. How do you feel about that?" "Terrified," she admitted. "Excited. Overwhelmed. All of it." Damien set the book aside and pulled her into his lap, holding her close. "We can do this," he said. "We've done harder things." "Have we though?" He laughed. "Fair point. But Naya, we've built something real. Something strong. We can build this too. What if you can't handle the lack of control? Babies are chaos incarnate." "Then I'll learn," he said simply. "The way I've learned everything else with you. One day at a time." Naya looked at this man who had terrified and fascinated her, who had almost consumed her, who had learned to love her without trying to own her. And she felt something she never expected to feel about Damien Cross. Certainty. "Okay," she said. "Let's do this. Together. Together." He kissed her, gentle and reverent, and Naya thought about how far they'd come. From that first night in the velvet room, when she'd been drawn to his danger like a moth to flame, through the intensity that nearly destroyed them both, into this partnership, growth, real love. 7 months later, when Naya went into labor, Damien held her hand and breathed with her and let her squeeze his fingers until they went numb. And when their daughter was born, screaming and perfect and utterly beyond anyone's control, Naya watched Damien hold her with shaking hands and tears streaming down his face. "She's perfect," he whispered. "You're both perfect. She's going to destroy our sleep schedule and our peaceful life and probably drive us both crazy," Naya said, exhausted and elated. "I know." Damien looked at her with so much love it made her chest ache. "And it's going to be worth every second." Later, when their daughter was sleeping in her bassinet and Damien was stretched out on the hospital chair trying to rest, Naya thought about the title of her story, about how she'd been terrified that loving him meant losing herself, about how she'd learned that the only word she needed to scream wasn't "don't stop" in surrender, but "don't stop" in encouragement. Don't stop growing. Don't stop learning. Don't stop choosing each other, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. "Hey," Damien said softly, catching her watching him. "What are you thinking about?" "About us. About how we almost destroyed each other. And how we chose not to. How we chose to build something better instead." Damien stood and came to sit on the edge of her bed, carefully mindful of her post-delivery soreness. He took her hand, and his grip was warm and steady and sure. "I love you," he said. "Not because you complete me or because I can't live without you, but because you make me want to be the best version of myself. Because you challenge me. Because you stay even when I give you every reason to leave." "I love you too," Naya said. "Even though you're still a control freak who asks too many questions and can't help trying to fix everything. I'm working on it. I know. And that's why I love you." Their daughter made a small sound in her sleep, and they both turned to look at her. This tiny human who would need them both to be strong, to be present, to keep doing the work. "We're going to mess this up sometimes," Naya said. "Probably," Damien agreed. "But we'll figure it out. Together. Together." And in that moment, in a hospital room at 3 in the morning, with their newborn daughter sleeping nearby and the future stretching uncertain before them, Naya felt something she'd been searching for her entire life. Peace. Not the absence of chaos, but the presence of partnership. Not the drowning intensity of early love, but the steady, enduring commitment of choosing each other every single day. The kind of love that didn't consume. The kind that set you free. Years passed. Their daughter grew. They had a son 2 years later, then another daughter. Their house filled with noise and chaos and the beautiful mess of family life. Damien learned to let go of control in small ways, then bigger ones. He learned that love didn't mean preventing pain, but being present through it. He still had moments where his old patterns resurfaced, but now he had the tools to recognize and redirect them. Naya learned that intensity didn't have to mean instability, that she could feel deeply without drowning, that setting boundaries wasn't rejection, but respect. They fought sometimes, had hard conversations, went to therapy when they needed help navigating rough patches. But they stayed. They always stayed. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Damien surprised Naya with a trip back to the waterfront where so much of their story had unfolded. They left the kids with Marissa and walked along the water hand in hand, the city lights painting the night in familiar patterns. "Do you remember?" Damien asked. "That night when I told you I was falling for you and it terrified me?" "I remember. You looked like you wanted to run." "I did, but I stayed instead. Best decision I ever made." Naya leaned into him, feeling the solid warmth of his presence. "Do you ever regret it? Doing all that work, changing so much of who you were?" "I didn't change who I was," Damien said. "I became who I was always meant to be. There's a difference." "And who's that?" "Someone worthy of you." Naya's throat tightened. "You were always worthy, Damien. You just had to believe it." "I believe it now." He stopped walking and turned to face her. "Because of you. Because you loved me enough to demand I be better, but not so much that you lost yourself in the process." "That's the trick, isn't it?" Naya said. "Loving someone completely while remaining completely yourself." "The greatest trick," Damien agreed. "And the hardest." They stood there in comfortable silence, watching the water lap against the shore, and Naya thought about the woman she'd been when she first walked into the velvet room. Guarded, wounded, afraid of her own intensity. And she thought about the woman she'd become. Strong, present, capable of loving deeply without drowning. "Thank you," she said suddenly. "For what?" "For doing the work. For not giving up on us when it would have been easier to walk away. For proving that change is possible when you want it badly enough." Damien pulled her close, resting his chin on top of her head. "Thank you for staying. For seeing the potential in me even when I couldn't see it myself. For being patient while I learned to love you properly." "We learned together," Naya murmured. "That's the point." They stayed there until the moon rose high and silver over the water. Two people who had almost consumed each other, learning instead to complement each other. Two people who had discovered that the greatest love wasn't the one that made you scream, "Don't stop," in desperate surrender. It was the one that made you whisper, "Don't stop," in joyful encouragement. Don't stop growing. Don't stop learning. Don't stop choosing each other one conscious decision at a time. Because in the end, that was what love was. Not possession. Not intensity. Not the drowning, all-consuming passion of novels and movies. Just two imperfect people, doing imperfect work, building something real and lasting and worth fighting for. Together. And that's the end of our story. If this moved you, if it made you think about your own relationships differently, do me a huge favor. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss my next story. Give this video a thumbs up if you loved Naya and Damien's journey. And most importantly, drop a comment and tell me, what did this story teach you about love? About choosing yourself while choosing someone else? I read every single comment and I'd love to hear your thoughts. Share this video with anyone who needs to hear this message. Remember, the greatest love isn't the one that consumes you. It's the one that sets you free while choosing to stay. Thanks for being here. Until next time, keep choosing growth, keep choosing yourself, and keep choosing love that honors both.